What's up, friends? Welcome back to Rooted Wisconsin, where we are dedicated to authentically sharing the stories of the people who drive Wisconsin culture. Thanks for being here for another episode. We'll kick our episode off the same way we do every time by thanking you. Thank you for your likes, shares, and subscribes. We appreciate you being out there. We appreciate you watching and engaging with our content. And we've got some exciting stuff coming up. So glad to have you here. Big shout out to our sponsors at Riverside Pizzeria, best pizza in Wisconsin. Stop in and see Ryan and his entire fantastic crew. Get the cheese out, get the pepperoncinis. We talk about it all the time. A little note to know the special when you go in. Ryan let me in on a little hint. It's the number of the month that you go. So if you're watching this in November, get the number 11, get a couple bucks off, and remember that cheese out. Riverside Pizzeria in Ashwaubenon, and probably coming to a neighborhood near you. And a big shout out to Discover Green Bay for our awesome studio space as well. That being said, let's jump into our next episode. Excited to welcome our next guest from Forward Beverage, Paul Yanzer. Thanks for coming in, Paul.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited to chat, man. You're doing some really, I think, groundbreaking stuff in Wisconsin, especially in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I want to dive into it all today, but I guess a great place to start. Our businesses are about the same. We were just talking Rooted Wisconsin and Forward Beverage, both about a year old.
Mm-hmm.
And before we dive into everything Forward Beverage is, just like, how would you encapsulate the last year? It's crazy becoming an entrepreneur, especially at the scale you're trying. How would you encapsulate your last year? What has it been?
It's been a wild ride. We opened in September of last year at during the Artrageous Art Festival in Wausau. So we had thousands of people walking up and down the street that our shop is on. We sold over 1,000 tap drinks, just with 2 flavors and these gold cups that everybody ended up walking around with.
Oh, nice.
And people said, "Where'd you get the gold cups? They're aluminum, they're recyclable, bring them back. We give you $1 off your tap." So that was a great launch to the business. We didn't have anything in cans ready to go. We wanted to by the time we opened, but it was just a learning process and learning how long it takes to get labels done and then printed and shipped. And I think labels and some of the fruits were on back order, and we just kind of had to open with what we had and run with it and do the best job that we could, and then bring out stuff down the line. We added cans to go in November. We started wholesaling in December, and we're in over 100 places around Wisconsin at this point. So it's just been a great experience, both from having the community that we're in welcome us so much and support us, and all the help that we received along the way, and then also seeing where things are going.
Yeah. So the community in Wausau, had you been an entrepreneur before, or is this your first business endeavor like this?
I had been an entrepreneur before. I owned a supplement company in Madison, Paragon Fitness and Nutrition. It was all e-commerce based. Both my business partner and I worked full-time jobs while we were running that. He was on the fire department in Madison and had a few other gigs on the side, and I was working as a scientist in various capacities during that time too.
Yeah. So that's kind of, I think, and that's where we start with your career journey, right? Like I see the cool social media posts, like the ones I like are you in the, what do you call it? The lab? Is it the lab?
It's kind of a lab. It's a commercial kitchen. It's really small. It's like probably 20 by 20 feet.
Okay.
And it's kind of like an R&D lab for us. And then we're able to do some one-off products and can back there. And the next step is turning that into, or registering it as a production facility so we can get those things into wholesale. But right now, like with the lemon drop and the lavender haze, those are just sold out of the shop. And they have to stay refrigerated. So the labels say keep refrigerated, and that allows us to do something like that.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that had to be hard. So I make maple syrup as a passion hobby, and there's a few rules around that, but I'm sure you run into a ton more. That had to be a big learning curve for the first year about like the stuff that you can and can't do, right?
It was and it wasn't. My background kind of helped with that a lot. Prior to moving up to Wausau, I ran research and development at Octopi Brewing, and my job was helping brands um, bring, excuse me, bring their product to life and help with label compliance, do calorie calculations. A big part of what I did there was do the CBD emulsion. So I created an emulsion where you mix oil and fat and it stays stable. And the goal was to just keep it as stable as possible in the can. And by the time I left, the cans that I initially worked on were still stable and still had the potency that was on the label. It was a year and a half later.
Okay.
So prior to that, I worked in pharmaceuticals and then various capacities in different government labs.
Okay.
So knowing the rules and regulations in the pharmaceutical industry with the FDA kind of translates a little bit. There are some similar documents, and it was a learning curve, but I had a good background.
Yeah. So how'd you end up on that path? How did your interests get in there?
Oh, man. I've always thought about, well, always had ideas. Working in labs, sometimes you just have to work by yourself and do the testing and stay on task. So when I was at the Cook County Medical Examiner's office in Chicago, that was one of those jobs. Everybody just stayed to themselves. There was a lot of work to do. And people just listened to music or podcasts. I listened to a lot of podcasts at that time. And listening to these other entrepreneurs and very interesting people just led to more and more and more ideas and wonder, and just very interested to learn how everything's put together and how everything fits together, both, well, on a lot of different levels. So moving from working in the lab environment, because I had a lot that I was thinking about outside of the lab, it was a difficult place for me to work. And when we moved from Chicago to Madison, I really wanted to branch out on my own and do my own thing and get out of the lab environment. So I started learning about entrepreneurship. How do you open a business? How do you start a business? How do you build a website? How do other people do this? And podcasts were a great way to figure all that out, and that just kind of started the ball rolling towards opening Paragon Fitness and Nutrition, and then the CBD piece is what took me to Octopi Brewing in Wanakee to help them out with those products, and then really enjoyed that side of the industry. I had kind of dabbled in home brew for a while and enjoyed that. So brewing was definitely an interest. And then I just liked meeting people and seeing what they were doing and getting to know them, seeing how I can help. That led to the creation of an R&D department and not just being a CBD person. So we patented like a coconut cream emulsion. So one of our clients could do a pina colada and a strawberry daiquiri with like heavy full fat coconut cream. So the inventive side of things and the idea side of things, it's always there. It's always going. And having, I guess, moving up here and then having the confidence to say, I think we can do this. And then Amy was like, hey, you make them, I'll sell them.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
Nice. Yeah. So was she in a career that she left to start the business?
She was, yeah. She's a musician. She's an incredible pianist.
Okay.
She really good. So we moved to Chicago after we got married because she wanted to work with opera singers as an accompanist. And she did a good job. But she also worked as a director of liturgy and music at churches. So she managed those programs, and then we moved back to Madison for a job that she took there at a big parish. It was like 9,000 parishioners, and she was coordinating 500 volunteers every month, putting them places to help out. There were 6 choirs, 5 or 6 masses a weekend, plus all the weekday masses. And she handled a lot there. So her background just really in organizing people and programs and holding events and setting up for those and understanding what to order and invoicing and all of these things translated really well. And she's really just doing a phenomenal job.
Nice.
Stepping into this role as a business owner.
Yeah. So one thing you mentioned, you started to get to the CBD thing in there. That's one thing that I want to learn about today. I want to learn how that works, because obviously, like, we're surrounded by states that we touch pretty much that have legalized cannabis in some form.
Yeah.
And Wisconsin obviously hasn't until now. But I noticed, like, some of the cans you send me, like, CBD's been a thing for a while, you know, like there's CBD. The cans have THC as well.
Yes.
So how does that work in Wisconsin? Like, how, and like, I was kind of reading the can. I think there's a, whatever you want to call it, like a notice or whatever about the dry weight is under such and such a level. I'm guessing that starts to lead into that.
That does.
Okay.
Yes. So in 2018, the federal government passed the most recent farm bill. It's a couple years overdue. And I'm kind of waiting on, like, new regulations to come down the line for hemp to see what that looks like. But in 2018, they legalized hemp, and the definition for hemp is that by dry weight, it is less than 0.3% THC. So when the plant grows, it gets tested before it's harvested, and the testing agency determines that it's a legal plant. If it's above 0.3%, I think you get a little leeway, maybe up to 0.4, or there's some rounding stuff in there. But if it's above that, then it's classified as marijuana. So hemp and marijuana are legal definitions at this point.
Yep.
It's the cannabis plant. And then the CBD and THC are the oils that the plant produces. And they kind of act like sunscreen in the plant, really. So UV light in growing situations can be used to increase the level of oils if it's done right. So back to how is this legal? That 0.3 rule also carries over to products. So that's why you're seeing THC gummies in Wisconsin and THC beverages like we're doing. As long as the THC comes from hemp, a legal hemp plant that has a certificate that's legal hemp, then it can be used for products and shipped nationwide, as long as the final product is less than 0.3% THC. So our beverages are, if you take out all the water, they're like 0.005% THC.
And that's where it makes it kind of unique having a beverage, right? Because you can actually put, I don't know if you want to call it a substantial amount, but you can put an amount in there that means something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So, and that, you know, when I think of it, I'm always, I look at life kind of as a business owner, and you think about that, and that's an awesome head start, right? Because I think it's written that Wisconsin probably will legalize cannabis sometime.
You would think. Yeah, you would think.
Yeah, you would think. But having that quote unquote head start is cool, you know? Okay. And you started working in that space probably when it was significantly more fledgling, it sounds like, right?
It was, yeah. So I actually owned a hemp processing company for a short time in 2018, 2019. Had to close it down for some reasons. But what I was doing with that was really, that was another, like, learning opportunity. So while I was waiting for funding from a potential investor, I got to watch the market, you know, kind of get flooded in 2019, and then the price of raw CBD started doing this. So it went from 10,000 a kilogram down to 1,000 a kilogram in less than a year. And being in that space is like, okay, there's innovation that you can do both with what you saw with, like, Delta 8 THC, which first came onto the market, which is CBD. You move some electrons around with a chemical reaction, and it turns into Delta 8 THC. And that was like the first instance where people in this state, at least, started trying out those intoxicating hemp products. Because the Farm Bill also, it not only legalized CBD, it legalized all of its isomers, which means if you take the carbon, the hydrogen, and the oxygen in CBD and THC, that formula is the same number. It's just electrons and bonds are a little bit different. So you can push electrons around and create a compound that is an isomer of another compound. So delta 8 THC fell within that legal category of product. Although at a federal level, synthesizing it is illegal with the DEA.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah, it's a really interesting market.
What a weird dynamic. I'm having a hard time getting past it. Blows my mind when you say something like push electrons around. Like, how does that even happen? What do you mean by that?
So in that specific case, you take CBD and an acid and a solvent, and the acid reacts with the various bonds on the CBD compound and breaks a double bond and attaches it over to a different carbon atom. So it's a single bond all the way through, creates a ring, and that's THC. So it's just one pair of electrons that moves to create a different compound.
And you do it with like a third substance, like a third activator or whatever. I'm sure there's a word for it.
It's an acid. It's an acid reactant.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a significant cleanup process on the back end to like make that a pure product, which the price for that is so low right now in the market, and I've met enough people in the industry to know that I wouldn't ever really touch that product anymore, because I don't think that there's anything clean on the market with how low of prices it is in a bulk setting.
Got it. Yeah, because prices are so low that people need to cut processing corners.
Yeah, okay. You just can't make profit, or people say they can't make profit by creating a safe product because it takes too much time and too much effort. Sure. And the cost is too high for where the market's at, which is true in a sense if you want to sell it in bulk. And that's just kind of where the market is at. So like regulation in this industry is super important, just for that aspect. And in Wisconsin right now, it is the Wild West. There is regulation. It's very low regulation. It allows for experimentation and kind of pushing boundaries, I guess, for this industry, for a cannabis industry that doesn't really exist yet in Wisconsin, which is kind of fascinating. So, cannabis is not, or marijuana is not legal here, but the industry is functioning, with edibles that are less than 0.3% THC and beverages that are less than 0.3% THC, and even like alternative cannabinoids that are intoxicating but not delta-9 THC in vape carts that people are inhaling or spraying on hemp. So it's really interesting.
That's one thing you reminded me of, something I was going to ask you. I think it was in the first one I tried, the jalapeno passion fruit. There was it seemed like there was another herb or plant in the ingredients list.
Thyme. Yeah, we use thyme in that.
That's not the one I'm thinking
of.
Oh,
ashwagandha.
Yes, ashwagandha. What's that?
Yeah.
I have no idea what that
Ashwagandha is an herbal root adaptogen. I think it's in the marigold family, kind of like sweet potatoes are.
Okay.
And what ashwagandha does is one of the compounds in that root helps your body adapt to stress. So you take these big, sharp cortisol responses that you get from a stressful situation, and what it does is it helps just balance that out a little bit, and kind of smooths out your stress response or your cortisol release. You take it over time, it works better, and that's kind of one of those rules of adaptogens. It's not an adaptogen unless it's non-addictive. It's not an adaptogen unless it works better over time, the more you take it, and it's a natural substance. So that would be like ginseng, which is huge in Wausau. Marathon County produces like 90% of the ginseng supply, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So ginseng, rhodiola, maca root powder, there's all kinds of them. And they all do like slightly different things, but one of the things that they all help with is that stress response.
Yeah. That just came to my mind because you brought that up, but I want to stay on that track because I think it's so interesting, the Wild West scenario that you mentioned earlier, because you can tell it truly is like, Our legislators have seemingly like decided to kind of turn a blind eye to it, and it blows my mind because it just seems like on a surface level we're losing so many tax dollars.
Yeah.
In the state, like people can go across virtually any border and spend a bunch of money of tax dollars that we're not getting, and it seems like normally, if in our political landscapes today, if something motivates politicians, it's money generally, and it seems like we're losing it. So I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. But that Wild West vibe has to be interesting to navigate as a business owner, for a lot of different reasons, right? Because like, if there's no line drawn, how do you know what you can do and where to cross? Is that what you're encountering?
There's the potential for that. So, with our concentration of THC in our drinks, we could take it up to 100 milligrams per drink and still be under that 0.3% THC limit. And we just don't think that that's responsible. As a new product in a state that largely needs education in the plant, how you can use it to help yourself and how it's not just something that gets you high. It's that's kind of the approach that I take with it, is like, how has this helped me in the past? How has cannabis or hemp helped me regulate my life or help me get a different perspective on things at times? And how have I used it to better my health, whether it's mental health or physical health at times? And then how can we educate people in the state of Wisconsin in like, how do we responsibly use this plant that is just a plant? CBD, THC. If cannabis gets legalized, or if marijuana gets legalized, then we're going to see high THC cannabis. When it's not legalized, we see low THC, high CBD. And there's nothing in the middle, because in marijuana markets, people just want to get high. And in CBD markets, well, it's just CBD. I don't know what you do with it. It helps everything maybe. But what's in the middle here, and how do we utilize how these compounds interact with our neurotransmitters and the endocannabinoid system in our body, and how can we utilize those things to help, I guess, with a lot of different, there's a reason why it seems like CBD helps with so many things. Endocannabinoid system, some of the research that I've read shows that the endocannabinoid system is like a regulator between your central clock, your suprachiasmatic nucleus is what it's called, which is your central clock, and then everything that regulates, which is everything. Everything is based off of our bodies work on light. Millions of years of evolution. We're awake during the day, we're asleep at night. Sunlight in the morning is a little bit red. Sunlight at noon is mostly blue, or bluer light hits you higher at noon. And then sunlight in the evening is red again. And how do our photoreceptors take that in, process it, and then how does that help us sleep? So people who use CBD for sleep, activating the endocannabinoid system that maybe hasn't been activated for a long time because maybe our gut health isn't great and we don't process fats well, or we haven't, fish oils convert to endocannabinoids. That's how they work on inflammatory pathways. The omega-3s and the omega-6s. Those convert to endocannabinoids and function on that system in the body. So if that hasn't been activated in so long and you're having trouble sleeping, but all of a sudden CBD helps you sleep, that might be where it's working, is on that neurochemical pathway, where it's just like activating the endocannabinoid system that allows the signals to get where they need to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I haven't dove too much into the CBD side of the research, but I mean, it's fascinating to hear about, right? And like going through my mind, I saw a cool, very vintage photo the other day. I think it was on social media, where it was a picture of a hospital. Seemingly the picture looked like it was probably like the 40s, I would guess. And they had wheeled hospital beds out into a terrace of a hospital so people could get sunlight.
Yeah.
And you think about what a hospital is now, like they're not wheeling people out into the sun, you know, but like even at that time, that probably, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't based on, you know, foundational research, but somebody knew that there was a benefit to do that, right? To wheel these hospital beds out into the sun.
Even in, there's a picture I've seen out of like Siberia in Russia in probably the same time period where you got to have this group of school kids standing in front of a big UV light, just a big UV light in the middle of a room, and these kids just standing around with dark sunglasses on to protect their eyes, but just getting vitamin D. Mm-hmm. And somebody who, you know, I've worked in labs my entire life, and most of them have been internal rooms. And in Wisconsin, you know, you in the winter you leave for work and it's dark, and then you get out of work and it's dark again. And if you don't see the light of day, like, your vitamin D just plummets. And I experienced that, and it's tough, you know, the mental health aspect from not seeing the light of day or not having good light exposure during the day really adds up over time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. You're talking about being an adventure sports fan earlier. Have you ever heard of the show Alone? Do you know the show Alone?
No.
Okay, so it's on the History Channel. Quick, 30-second explanation is they drop people in very remote areas. So like a lot of them happen in the Arctic Circle, like just into the Arctic Circle. And it's truly, we hear the term reality TV thrown out around, but it's truly reality TV where they can bring 10 things that they choose, and whoever stays there the longest wins. One guy in the last season that I watched, he ended up being the winner. So think about that what you will, but like, there was a really cool scene, probably, I don't know, the winter usually happens between like 60 and 90 days, I would say. And right around like day 30 or 40, like it's getting super cold in the Arctic Circle. And this guy stripped down to like his undergarments and was laying in the sun when everybody else is bundled up to the max and stuff. And, you know, probably the same premise, right? Like I think about that hearing you talk too, like the importance of that, even in that scenario where you're like fighting tooth and nail to survive, that was part of his survival method, was to do that. Yeah.
It's, that's cool. That somebody took the time on the show to actually just do that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, the sun, I'm getting this.
Yeah. The shot was awesome too, because he was like laying down and they showed like his bare legs and feet like sitting up in this, basking in the Arctic sun.
Yeah. It's incredible. All that stuff fascinated me for years. I spent a lot of time reading research in the nutrition and wellness space, and kind of found a real heavy interest in sleep science and kind of health from an ancestral perspective. You know, millions of years of evolution. Like, what did that lead up to? Evolution is purely just survival. You know, survival of the fittest. What worked? And there's 3 constants across human evolution: sunlight. We're awake during the day. We're asleep at night. Water. We require clean water. And then magnetism from the earth. So those 3 things, not even food's constant, because that varies on your latitude and your light exposure. So I think particularly with people who see a lot of success with like the ketogenic diet or the carnivore diet, I think a lot of that is based on light exposure. You know, an office environment is like the lighting of a cave. You're not getting, even under artificial lighting like this, you're just not going, it doesn't do what the sun does. So eating to where your latitude is or your light exposure is, and as it changes with the seasons, I think is kind of where you lead to optimal health.
I have never even considered that or heard about it, but that's awesome to think about.
It is. It's there's few people doing research in that area. It's kind of gets out there. It's kind of in a biophysics realm. You know, how does light affect our cells and how do our mitochondria respond to different responses, and how can we like build up our health based on these sciences and this ancestral aspect of it. Yeah.
So do cheese curds match our latitude and longitude really well in Wisconsin?
They have, maybe they have long enough that we can do that.
Yeah.
I still eat cheese curds.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You have to.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's so fun to think about. That's so fun to think about where the ideal diet for someone in Brazil could be far different than the ideal diet of someone in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we hear it all the time, like no diet is a one size fit all for everybody.
Yep.
And that's absolutely true. But why? You know, why are some people genetically predisposed to not lose weight with a diet that helps other people lose weight? And there's a lot more to it than what I just said. But I think at a foundational level, like that's kind of where it starts. You know, if people are having trouble losing weight, have we tried an elimination diet? Have we found foods that don't work for us? Have we tried fixing our lighting environment or just getting more sleep, putting the phone down before you go to bed? Is your testosterone low? You might not need hormone replacement therapy. You might just need to lift some heavy weights and build up your testosterone naturally, or get your hormones back on track. There's a lot to it, and it's not an easy one size fit all, and it doesn't fit into the way our current medical system is, because you don't have enough time to talk about stuff like this.
Right. Yeah. That's so far out of the realm of diagnose quickly, get the answer we have available, and then find the next problem.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Keep them alive long enough to find the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's not a doctor thing. That's a system thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So speaking of sleep, one of the ones that you had sent to try out was kind of based on sleep, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of that one.
It was the Lavender Haze Nitro Sleep Elixir.
Yeah.
Which kind of sounds counterintuitive. The nitro is because we use nitrogen gas instead of carbon dioxide. So it's a still beverage. We dose it with liquid nitrogen that expands quite a bit in the can and then pressurizes into the liquid.
It was really interesting to shake.
Yeah.
Because like it felt like, and I don't know if this is how it's supposed to work, but shaking it felt like it got more robust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating.
You shake it, you hear it shaking, and then it slows down, and then it like stops. And that's when you kind of know it's ready.
Okay.
But the idea with that is like it's a shaken cocktail out of a can, and then we were able to put a stable head of foam on it while still keeping it vegan. So it's like an egg white shaken cocktail. So you can have like a fancy cocktail before you go to bed that actually helps you sleep. And we use magnesium, zinc, vitamin B6, and theanine for that. Theanine is another one of these compounds that's considered an adaptogen in some circles. But really what it does is it kind of helps your brain just like relax. There's research that shows that it helps put you into a flow state a little bit easier. It just calms the mind. But the magnesium, the zinc, and the vitamin B6 are ingredients that we used in a sleep supplement with Paragon Fitness and Nutrition. And we use those because it's what your brain uses to convert glutamate, which is your excitatory neurotransmitter, into GABA, an inhibitory one. So it's designed to downregulate your mind. It's not, if you have it at noon, it's not going to put you to sleep, but you might feel a shift down. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. And it sounds more effective than the 4 tacos that can do that to my brain too.
Yeah.
It does. That one tasted so good. My wife drank the majority of that one, but I got to try it. And I really like the flavor of that one. It was great.
Thanks. It turned out really nice. I like that one a lot.
Yeah. So that's, as I think I said it earlier today, I like, I like bubbly drinks. So like I've gravitated towards like the jalapeno passion fruit one. I like carbonation, but on a grander scale than that, as we talk about these drinks, what initially led me to kind of engaging with your brand was I love the concept of non-alcoholic beverages in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Started a show called Rooted Wisconsin. I love Wisconsin. I love our area. I think we live in one of the greatest places on earth. At the same time, throughout my life, I've evolved into a kind of a weird sentiment towards our drinking culture in Wisconsin. Like it's great. I love that everybody enjoys it and has a good time, but there's certainly, on the scale that we take things at life, like, I don't know that it's something we should always hang our hat on as Wisconsinites.
Man, I was a part of that too. I got to college in 2003. I went to University of Wisconsin-Platteville. And at the time, the university had about 5,500 students in a town of 5,000 people. And it was the biggest town in the county. There was not a lot to do. So I fell into the drinking culture because it's what everybody else was doing. I didn't particularly want to drink when I went to college, but started because that's what was going on. And it was fun. It was a huge social lubricant. Like, for me, it was a social slip and slide. And all of those difficulties that I had socializing, especially in group settings, just went away. And it was fun because I got to hang out with people. I didn't have to think about how to be or how to interact with people. And all of that went away, and I was just able to socialize and have fun with my friends. And, being ADHD, one good thing in my hand and drinking and my, dopamine gets released. So my body's like, wow, that's good. I'll just have another one. I'll just have another one. So I could never just have one. And that was where the problem was for me. I didn't realize that Wisconsin was different than other states until I had an internship in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And met other students at a university down there while we were doing research. And there was one guy from the UP there. And, we kind of bonded because it was like, we got there and I was like, hey, you want to grab a beer? Mm-hmm. We're like, it's noon on a Sunday.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, what's wrong with that? And he's like, oh, all right, let's go. And I spent 2 summers doing this research program in Cleveland at Case Western University. And by the second summer, I was coming back to my last year in college. And I was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. It's just not, it's not what I need to be doing right now. But then, moved back into the same house. I had great roommates. They were a ton of fun. They were good people. And we threw parties. Mm-hmm. So it was just like kind of right back into it. So that was tough. I tried to quit drinking quite a few times over the years, just because I knew I had an issue with it, and I thought that taking a 6-month break every now and then would fix it, mm-hmm. and give me a better relationship with alcohol, and it just never did. That was always the hard part, and finally, like, acknowledging while I was working at Octopi, as the person who signed off on the packaging tanks in the morning before they got packaged. So I had to do sensory, is it carbonated enough? Does it taste right? Do all the lab tests come back good? And then once all that is checked out, sign off on it, and then the team can package it. So I started drinking at like 7 a.m. And then doing research and development, it was sometimes you just keep tasting stuff and trying things all day and flavoring things because it's what you have to do. Mm-hmm. And it just added up. And eventually it got to be too much, and we had access to way too many good drinks because the low fills that got kicked off the packaging line we were able to take home and share with, keep them in the house, but don't share them with people because, it's not a good representation necessarily of the company's product that it is.
Yep.
So that environment just made it very clear that this was an issue that I had.
Mm.
So made the choice to stop drinking on April 18th, 3 years ago. It was like 6 IPAs in on a Sunday night, and opened the last one, and I was like, what am I doing? I have to go to work in the morning. It's 11 o'clock. I dumped it out. It was like the first beer I ever dumped out. Went to bed, and that was it. Just kind of had to acknowledge, like, I can't control this. So the drinking culture in Wisconsin, like, I totally get. I was a part of it. I was proud of it. I thought it was cool that we had the drunkest universities in the nation. But there does need to be a shift, especially as we learn more about the dangers of alcohol. You know, alcohol right now might be where cigarettes were in the 1950s or the 1960s, where the World Health Organization is saying, hey, cancer can stem from alcohol. Alcohol is linked to 7 different types of cancer right now. It's a toxicant at any level. People are shifting their mindset to saying 1 glass of wine a night might not be as healthy as we thought it was. So all of this new information coming out about alcohol, and we have a generation, Gen Z is just not drinking by a long shot as much as previous generations. There's a shift going on. So if we can be a part of that in Wisconsin, I totally want to be a part of it, because I think it's a shift that needs to happen for our state. I'm not, damning alcohol by any means. I would never do that because I think it would be pretty hypocritical. And I'm not telling people to stop drinking. That's their choice. But if we can present information and provide an option where people don't, you feel like you can have an adult beverage even though there's no alcohol in it. The cans look like
the social
an adult
seltzer.
Yeah, or a soft cocktail. It's not a mocktail. It's not a kiddie cocktail. It's not a Shirley Temple. It's not going to get served in a plastic cup. You get to hang out with your friends, have something that looks adult, feels adult. It just doesn't have alcohol in it.
Mm-hmm. So a couple things I want to pull out of there. One, you kind of put a bow around the exact thing that I was getting at of like, oh, it's just normal to us. Like, I think we aren't the only two that experience that, right? Like at some point, I think a lot of Wisconsinites have that realization, like, dang, like most other people don't have the same relationship with alcohol that we do. Like there was a point in my life where it was normal to drink 15 beers. Like that shouldn't be normal for anybody, and that was just,
it was normal.
That was like a Tuesday, that's, I don't remember when I had that specific realization, but it was like, man, that's a complete shift of how I looked at my relationship with alcohol. And I eventually ended up stopping drinking too. I got to a point where like I would have one beer and I would get like these pounding headaches the same day. So something wasn't treating my body the way that it should have been with it. So luckily I had a pretty easy time stopping, surprisingly, because similar to your story, like I did the same thing starting through high school all the way through, my mid to late 20s. I was, completely okay with consuming 10 beers and just like, feeling that was a normal thing. So that concept, I just love bringing to light about how like most other places don't have the same relationship with alcohol. And I think it's just so valuable. And the same way, it's not telling everybody run out and stop drinking today. You don't have to do that. But like, I think being aware of that is something that's really valuable, especially for younger adults as they age into adulthood who like, I think having that awareness come sooner rather than later is a good thing.
Oh yeah.
That it didn't for us, Yeah. So that was one piece. You put that really well. And then secondarily, being another person that's quit drinking as well, luckily I'm extremely like hard-headed and I very much lean towards like, I don't care what people think about me. So I never like got the awkward feeling of being in a bar but not drinking a beer. Like I don't feel strange. But what did, I know a lot of people do. That's like a completely normal thing to feel like, oh my goodness, I've done this my whole life. Like, what do I even hold on to? Like the classic Wisconsinite pose is like this.
Yes.
You know, like people have to have something in their hand. But past that, I would find frustration in like pretty much everywhere I'd end up going. Like my go-to thing that I found is I would order a seltzer water with a lime because I like bubbly drinks. And like sometimes it just felt weird getting charged like $3 for a seltzer with a lime. Yeah. So like being someone who looks at that scenario like that, I was like, well, this isn't cool. And that's where I found my frustration, is access to things that I truly enjoyed drinking in those spaces where like I didn't want to just have like a water, you know? So that's the other thing that I think you're bringing to the table is like, you know, it's I don't have to order a Mountain Dew, which I'm not going to drink, you know, like there's something there that can be as enjoyable and still produce some, you know, some effects that I enjoy, but it's not alcohol based. I love that, man.
Thank you.
And that's, I'm assuming that's kind of how you
that's the exact, that's exactly it. We, you know, when we moved up to Wausau, Amy and I went out for, oh gosh, it was either my birthday or an anniversary dinner, and went to a nice restaurant, and I think they had one NA beer. An NA beer just doesn't, it's never really sat well with me, my stomach, even the NA stuff. And I learned that after quitting drinking too. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to have that. And they had some soda options, like a diet Minute Maid, and that was it. So I just had water again. I was like, gosh, I just wish there was something else that I could have that tasted good, that'd be like something I would make at home. And like, you know, didn't have a bunch of fake stuff in it or wasn't loaded with sugar. Like we can just create real drinks that taste good. And there's a lot of places doing like really great mocktails with their bartender. But ultimately, that's kind of where our business stemmed from, was that idea that we kept going out for dinner. And there's just nothing. It wasn't just Wausau, it was Madison too. There's just not a lot available, and definitely nothing like local outside of the beer scene. So that's exactly where it stemmed from. Amy, one day over the winter, Amy was like, I'm kind of bored. Let's start working on this beverage company, because I had been talking about ideas and kind of wanted to do it with the company that I moved up to. We moved up to Wausau for, but realized it just wasn't the right people to do that work with. So we started working on it in January of 2023, purely to give people an option, that's not loaded with fake sugars. It's not loaded with sugar as a first ingredient, and actually would be a ready to drink cocktail that's actually ready to drink. We use herbal extracts, so you can garnish the in fashion with rosemary, but there's rosemary extract in it, so you get the taste of the garnishment. And they're all ready to drink as a real cocktail. They have the mouthfeel of a real cocktail, they just don't have the alcohol. I think I might have drifted a little bit in topic.
Oh, that's good. No, we're still on track, man. Like sitting at that dinner table, I think resonates with more people than we know in Wisconsin about like, what do you order here? Or like, what do you have? And I pulling out of that, what you were talking about, like a lot of times when you try something new or push the boundaries or, are being, pun intended, forward thinking, you have to be in the right environment to create that stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you have to do it yourself, which is why you're forging the path, And I'm just glad that you're doing it, because I think that's what stops a lot of people. Like, I'm sure hundreds of people have had that same feeling at the table, but they're like, oh my, we live in Wisconsin though. Yeah. Like, this is just what we expect. And then just try not to change it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, know exactly that. And yeah, that's part of why we named the company Forward, is sometimes you just have to move forward in order to move to where you want to be in life. You know, it kind of makes sense saying it out loud, but in practice, it's a little bit harder to like sometimes leave things behind that may have been a part of your life or a part of like what you viewed as important to your culture. Like we'll never leave cheese behind in Wisconsin. But sometimes, you know, everybody's different. Sometimes you need to drop something to get to be the person you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was exactly why I dropped alcohol, because it wasn't making me the person that I wanted to be. You know, I tried not to drink around the kids. But I didn't want to be a dad that was like, my kids saw drunk,
Mm-hmm.
or my kids saw drinking regularly, or like, they were like, oh yeah, beer and this, and like they get interested in it. I was like, I didn't want that.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to change. I had to move forward.
It's funny you bring that up because, you know, it's significant because like to the point it impacted your life that you rattled off the date earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's a spot in time that's, visceral in your mind. But I never felt, there were countless times that I can think back on where I acted in an asinine way because I had been drinking.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt about it. But I had never, I didn't delve too much into like the feeling shame about it, because I think a lot of that culture thing resonated with me. Like,
right.
Oh, everybody does it. You know, everybody feels like a dummy sometimes after doing things. But I had stopped drinking before I had my son. So I don't know what it's like to, you know, have that feeling. But if I try to envision what I would have felt, I certainly would have felt shame. And I would not have been able to be the person I wanted to be consistently drinking out. Because the same thing, like you said, I wouldn't want him to see me in ways that I've acted throughout my life when drinking alcohol, you know? And that's a heavy thing. That's a heavy thing to think about. Yeah.
Sometimes those heavy things are like the most important things to consider why they're heavy.
No doubt.
And if you consider them for a while and do the tough thing and maybe decide you need to make a change, then I think that's growth, you know.
Absolutely.
Where growth starts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that mindset consistently is how growth keeps going. And you can put that all the way to forging a path and building a new business, you know, like having the mindset of, here's the problem, identify it. Oh, I've got a cool solution that we could come up with. And I guess maybe that's somewhere we could take it now. That's something I'm intrigued in when thinking about your business and thinking about kind of what the day-to-day looks like. I think one of the cool parts would be like coming up with new flavors. So when I saw your post about the new lemon one that you sent me, like, what does that process look like? How do you find the new ones and keep moving forward with them? Like, what does that creative process look like?
Generally get inspiration from somewhere. Like the In Fashion was the first one that I formulated. I never really drank old fashions. I didn't care for them. But I knew it was a Wisconsin staple. And if we were going to do this, we needed to include a Wisconsin staple as a Wisconsin brand that's using the state's motto as our brand name. So working on the In Fashion, it was like, well, an In Fashion is mostly whiskey. There's a little bit of like muddled cherry and orange and sugar at the bottom, and then maybe something else that people add if they want to spruce it up, but it's mostly whiskey. So you can't just like take the whiskey out and go like, oh, this is an NA old fashioned. It has sugar and some extracts and a little bit of cherry in it. And it just feels like something's missing. You know, this isn't talking about any brand in particular. This is stuff that I worked on while working at Octave High. You know, my counterpart, Sam Green, and he's the head brewer of Untitled Art. It's a beer brand. They do really great NA beer. Sam figured that one out. Their non-alcoholic beers are like hands down my favorite. anyway, we worked on some NA stuff, and it was like, no matter what you tried, like something was always missing when you just took the alcohol out. So you had to, there's ways to add that back in. Some people use, go for the burn in the back of the throat, like put a little spice in there in some way. I use mouthfeel modulators or gums, which are natural compounds that provide a little bit of mouthfeel and thickness that disappears when you take out the alcohol. And then with the the in fashion, at the core of it, you can take the flavors that are in it with the whiskey and the fruits and the garnishments, and then add that back in. So we use brown sugar and molasses, just as the tannins from the molasses add a lot to that old-fashioned feel, where the whiskey goes away. The tannins kind of provide a little bit of that feel, or taste, I guess. And then the tart cherry and the blood orange add that orange and cherry aspect to it. And then the rosemary for garnishment. So it's really breaking down a drink that I'm inspired by into, like, at a core level, like, what's going on. And how do we recreate that as an NA option? So the lavender haze, that was an idea I had back in 2020, not in its current form, it's far from the current form, but like a sleep supplement or a sleep drink that actually worked. And when I started working on that again, it was carbonated, and it was along the lines of, well, initially it was going to be in the place of the jalapeno passion fruit as our fourth. And it just wasn't what I wanted it to be as a carbonated drink. And I had gotten to be friends with, after we moved up to Wausau, the owner of Redwood Street Roasters, it's a coffee company in Edgar, Wisconsin. He has a nitro canning line in his basement. So he showed me things around. He has the best, like, nitro cold brew. And it got me thinking, like, what if we did a nitro drink? Like, we can create a stable head of foam. We can make it a shaken cocktail out of a can just by using the nitrogen. Nitrogen, instead of carbon dioxide, adds a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of mouthfeel, and then those bubbles rise up into the foam. So you pour it into a cocktail glass, and it looks like a cocktail out of a can. And that's where that process kind of, like, stemmed from. And then the lavender haze just kind of built from there. So instead of using, like, artificial food coloring, we use a butterfly pea powder to turn it purple. And that you can shift the color purple based on the pH of the drink. So it can go to neutral is blue, acid is like pink, and about 3.5 is about lavender.
Really?
Yeah.
Super interesting.
Yeah. So cool. I just like cool stuff.
Yeah.
How can we take this and move it over here and apply this into there, and what can we create with that?
Yeah.
That's
how most innovators operate, man. That's how you're wired,
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Actually, speaking of that, if we can, I want to shift gears a little bit. I meant to ask you if it was all right to talk about this before the show, but we had some setup stuff going on. But I want to just kind of pick your brain a little bit if you're cool with it. If not, we can cut this out. But how has being autistic impacted positively or negatively your career up to this point? Because thinking about stuff like that, I mean, there has to be some benefits as well as some mountains to climb, right?
Yeah. So I got diagnosed with autism right before we moved up to Wausau. I was 37. Spent my whole life just not knowing. So autism, ADHD, and PTSD were my diagnoses.
All at the same time?
All at the same time. Yeah, at 37. And honestly, stopping drinking allowed me to realize that I had some problems I had to work through. I think I was covering up a lot of stuff that was going on in the past few years before I quit drinking. And we also had a lot going on at the time. Amy had big jobs, and she also had 20 piano students. I had a full-time job, some companies here and there, and I was also fixing up this 4,000 square foot house in Madison for 4 years. And there was just a ton going on. And drinking just covered up it allowed me to just not think about the issues I was having. Quitting drinking then, all of a sudden it was like, I got to work through this stuff. So I found a good therapist, and just to like work through some things and process some stuff. And she recommended that I go to get diagnosed for neurodivergence. So I set that up and went through the process. And, the second I got diagnosed, it was like all of these ruminating thoughts that I was having about my entire life, like these interactions that I had that just didn't go right. Or like somebody stopped talking to me. Like, what went wrong here? It just stopped because like, there's just something I couldn't really help. There's one of the tests that was involved was pick out the offensive statements in the story. 1 out of 10. I just don't. Some things is lost on me. So the that social lubricant side of alcohol was really that's what it took away. Like all of those thoughts about how do I interact in this situation. Okay, this person is here, and also this person, and I know how to interact with them separately, but in a group they act differently. So how do I do this? And those are like the challenges that I have with the autism, but there's a lot of advantages. My special interest for 10 years was reading research and nutrition and science and performance science. And it's just like what I like to do in my free time. And if I had the data myself, I'd do it for 12 hours. Just read research papers. So advantages and disadvantages, yeah. And the creative side of things, it's just, like I said, it's always going. And then being able to get diagnosed and understand more about myself has really allowed me to just focus my energy to my strengths and not worry as much about things that are challenging for me, because I don't have to think about why it is. It's just like, okay, this is this situation that, I can plan ahead. This situation is going to be like this. Here's how I can approach, like today I arrived like half an hour before 9:15. So I wasn't arriving here at 9:15 for a 9:30 podcast interview without having time to just like sit and get my mind right.
Yep.
So yeah, just being able to like plan for stuff because I understand myself better has been great.
That has to be an absolute trip at 37 to think about all those scenarios. And it has to feel like you were like walking in the dark without a flashlight your whole life.
Yeah. I have these instances every now and then in my life where I reprocess everything because there's some new information that came to light. Maybe it's about a subject that I know a fair amount about, and something like changes my understanding of it. I'll like stay up all night, like thinking about everything that impacts about what I know, and like how does that change what I know. I stayed up all night reprocessing like everything, and it was just like I wasn't upset about it. It was just happening, and it was just like, okay. Like I woke up in the morning, felt great. I got a little bit of sleep, but I was up most of the night, and just understanding better about what I already knew with a different perspective.
Yeah, because at that point, up until the diagnosis, it's none of those three things had ever crossed your mind.
I had joked about autism every now and then because I knew that I had like some traits.
Sure.
Social settings were hard. I'm introverted, but not. Like I like hanging out with people. I like having fun. I like doing things. I just need to pick and choose and not do too much because I burn out a lot easier. than most people.
Mm-hmm. So it's probably a good thing we got this put on the calendar like 30 days in advance so you could prep for this.
Yes. Yep.
Nice.
No, but it's great. I honestly forgot what you asked before I started talking.
Oh, just about that you had never had an inkling about those things or kind of maybe crossed your mind.
Yeah, like I said, joked about it a little bit with some people every now and then. My sister has a degree in special education, and she's like, I mean, you have some tendencies, but no, you're not autistic. You know, this person I grew up with my entire life, she knows me.
Yeah.
And then I had a really good friend in grad school. It's like, Paul, you have autistic tendencies. It's like, yeah, I kind of do, but I'm not autistic. And that was like it. I didn't really seriously consider it because I was, managing pretty well. And maybe looking back, I wasn't managing as well as I thought I was. I had a lot of instances of burnout that I didn't recognize at the time. I ended up on medical leave from a job as a pharmaceutical scientist because there were just some nights that I would come home from work unable to get thoughts from my brain to my mouth. Like I couldn't talk. Mm. And Amy and I were ships passing in the night at the time, so she would leave and I'd be on with the kids who were like 1 and 2. And just kind of trying to manage, like get them fed, get them bathed, read to them, get them in bed, and then, clean the house.
Mm-hmm. And that's a transition for a lot of people. That was an involvement for me when I became a dad, that transition period between work and home. Yeah. It's such a stark difference that you have to be hard to make. And then if you're feeling that burnout already, that's what an extra burden or weight on top of it, Yeah.
That's kind of how I got into the CBD stuff too. Like there's one of these days I stopped at the co-op on the way home from work, was having a rough time, like brain fog, couldn't remember what I had done during the day, couldn't remember what I had, like just couldn't remember stuff. Couldn't talk. Went into the grocery store, was getting the food that was on the list, and this was like 2015, 2016, when some stores were starting to put some CBD products on their shelf, and they were giving out some free samples. So I tried a little bit of a tincture, put it on my tongue, walked around the grocery store. By the time I was done, I could talk, didn't have any issues. I was like, well, this is doing something. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started using CBD to help with those issues. Going on medical leave for a year, purely because like when you can't remember something as a pharmaceutical scientist, it's not good. Yeah. And just being home with the kids and then working on recovery and all of those things that I had studied and learned about, just from my interest in nutrition and performance stuff, I put into practice. So I was doing Wim Hof breath therapy, cold therapy, red light therapy. After I do the Wim Hof breathing, how long can I stand outside? It's -11 right now, in just shorts. Mm-hmm. Making sure my light exposure is good, taking the kids on walks, and all of that helped me recover. And that's kind of where the Paragon in Fitness and Nutrition came into play, was those recovery methods that I used to help myself, kind of stemmed into this business where right before COVID, we were looking to get more into the consulting side of things. We were working with some CrossFit Games athletes and some people who trained receivers in the NFL, and kind of getting more into the consulting side of things. And then we were forced to rebrand by another company for trademark infringement, and we rebranded, and then COVID happened, and it was just, that took care of that.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. I appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing and learning more past the business. There's so much value in those conversations. nothing else, if like the positive benefits are shared. Have you ever seen the video where I can't remember if, I think it was a gummy. I think he had a gummy. Can't remember if it was CBD or THC, but it was a person with really advanced Parkinson's that had, couldn't control their bodily movements, and then had something, THC or CBD, I can't remember which it was, and just completely stopped those involuntary movements.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Sitting on a couch. Like, okay, well, there's something there. Let's find out what it is, right? And because if it works at that, of course, anything like that can scale down into these micro wins for people in spaces in their lives. And that's so important. That's what we're here for, to make life better,
Yeah. Yeah. It, one of the most powerful things it helped me do was it allowed me to get my mind to just slow down a little bit at the end of the day so I can actually do that work. It allowed me to slow down enough to say, okay, I have time to sit and meditate, or I have time to sit and do this yin yoga and just, get my body into a better place or get my mind into a better place, process the day, which, at the time undiagnosed, I had no idea why it was important for me to process the day. But processing the day and meditating on it and thinking about it allowed me to approach the next day better. And, with everything going on without hemp or cannabis, I don't know if it would have happened that way. So those stories, I guess I'm a part of that too. It's not as visible as those dramatic ones where you see a kid tell their dad, I love you, after they've not been able to talk, right? What an incredible thing. I can't imagine. So what is it doing on the neurochemical level that helps with these things? We need to know more about things like Parkinson's and more about things like autism to fully understand what's going on, and then how do we implement therapies that help people out?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it was an awesome conversation. I appreciate you coming in to chat,
already.
Paul.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. It was great getting to know you and hear your story a little bit. And I wish you the most success possible going forward, man. I hope everything keeps full steam ahead for you.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. It's been exciting so far. Thanks for having me on.